Listeners, are you ready for your monthly literary adventure? We now have the BFF Book Club. Join us each month to explore a new book. After reading, connect with fellow book lovers and meet the author in a live interview. Can't make it live? Don't worry. We'll send you the recording. You can find all the upcoming book club selections at www.bookishflights.com/read/BFF book club. Hi, I'm Cara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Nicole Jansezian. Nicole lives in Jerusalem, where she reports on the complicated yet beautiful aspects of this city, as well as the challenges facing the people of the Holy Land. She and her husband Tony are raising 3 children in a crossroads of languages, cultures, and religions. You can find her at www.nicjan.com and at her podcast, The Inside Scoop Jerusalem. Welcome to the show, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Cara. It's great to be with you.
I am so excited to have you on the show today. Listeners, Nicole and I connected a while back and we finally have our meeting today, but I'm so excited to have you here for what you're going to talk about.
Oh yeah, me too. Thank you so much. I'm excited to chat and this is great. I love your show. So I think this is a happy to be on it. Thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome and thank you. Well, why don't you start by telling us what brought you to Jerusalem and how long have you been there?
Well, I've been here for over 20 years. Sorry, I
Okay.
have one standing right here by the microphone. Okay, well, I've been here for more than 20 years,
Okay.
and I came from the US. I came from New York, and it was one of those things where the long story short was I just wanted to live in Jerusalem. Like I had thought about like different places to live. I wanted to be a reporter. I specifically wanted to be a war correspondent.
Okay.
And there had been conflict going on at that time, but in different places like in Iraq and Afghanistan and stuff like that. But I thought, in Jerusalem, where at the time there was an intifada going on, which is like a violent uprising, and there were bombings and things like that going on on a regular basis. And I thought, like every place else comes and goes, but Jerusalem will always be contentious for some reason.
Yeah.
So I had searched reporter job Jerusalem and in Google, and I found this organization's looking for a reporter for its Jerusalem branch. And I was like, okay, let me try that out. And I sent my resume, I sent a cover letter and hit send. And then I started packing and I was like, I'm on my way to Jerusalem. But I didn't find out for 2 months, but I did end up moving there 2 months later. So anyway.
Wow. Had you been there before?
Yeah. And so I said, no, I really want to live here. And that was it.
Wow. That's amazing because that is no small move, A. We've done international moves ourselves. And B, did you have any like buddies, any friends? Were you and your husband together at this point? Were you going alone? Like, I mean, that's a whole nother ball game as well.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
no, it was completely alone. It was completely that I am just going to do this adventure. And if it doesn't work out,
Yeah.
so what? I just go back, go back home. I could always move back to my parents' house if I have to, and I didn't
Okay.
have a husband at the time. I did meet him I met a guy within the first year
Okay.
that I moved here. I met him. And then that was it. I
Wow.
figured I could stay. So after a few weeks, I was like, yeah, I really like it. After a few months, I was like, okay, I can see, where it's tough and
Sure.
the honeymoon's over, in some ways with the city, with the move. And then I met Tony. And then we just we
Okay.
dated for 3 years. Um, and during that time, it was like, we pretty much, it was just natural to just stay here. So,
Okay.
because he's from here. So it was a natural stay at that point.
Because in my mind, I'm thinking like, okay, I would probably tell myself like, okay, I'm gonna go try it for a year, right? I'll give myself a time frame, and then if it doesn't work out, then I'll just go. Like, okay, I tried it, I gave it a shot, I was brave, I was courageous, which is what I'm thinking of you. And then I would, but I'd give myself this time frame to see, does this work or does this not? So,
Oh yeah. Well, I totally had an unofficial time frame in my mind, and
sure.
it was, I will tell you that, brave it may sound, but the night before, when, everything was packed and I was staring at the suitcases, and I was at my parents' house, the place I grew up in, my childhood
Yeah.
room, and I'm looking at those suitcases and I'm like, oh my gosh, like panic, utter panic.
What
Like,
am I
am I
doing?
really doing this? Yeah. But then I was like, you know what? I'll just do it. And if I hate it after a week, I can move back. If I hate it after a year, I can move back. So, it ends it, but I have to do it. I just had to get it out of my system. See, can I live overseas? Can I? And I've always wanted to. I mean, I know that you've mentioned you lived in Italy, and I would love to live in Italy. I mean, my family is Italian,
Okay.
actually. All my grandparents were born in Italy, so yes, I would love to live in Italy at some point in my life. But this happened, and then this stuck for a really long time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
yeah.
remember our first move away from home. My husband and I were married at that point, but we moved to Hawaii actually, which was 5,000 miles from Chicago. I mean, it was still the US, but it was really far. And my mom flew out with me because I had two cats at the time. So she like helped me. He had already had to leave for work. So he had already gone, and they've really strict quarantine laws on pets, similar to Italy. So I had to stay behind with the cats until like the cats could enter. And we got there, and my mom stayed for 10 days just to make a vacation out of it as well and kind of help me get settled. And we went shopping the last day before she was there. And we were like, I was in the, we're shopping in the women's section, and she's like kind of by her stuff and I'm by mine. And it just dawned on me like the last person that I knew was going to leave tomorrow, and then I'm going to be here all by myself. And I just started crying in the middle of the store.
Oh
And my
my
mom
God.
finds me. She's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, I'm just having a moment that, like, outside of my husband, the last person that knows me anywhere within the vicinity is leaving tomorrow.
Oh my
Then,
gosh.
like, I don't
Yeah.
know if you had
I
a moment like that of just like, then you get there and you're like, oh, okay, now I'm here.
Yeah, no, it was like that. It was, I panicked the night before, and then I got on the plane, I got here. And then when I was here, and I remember like walking around, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to go with it. I'm just going to like love the
Yeah.
adventure. And I have an escape route if I need it, but I'm going to love the adventure. But then I remember thinking to myself, nobody knows me. Nobody knows my history. Nobody knows anything about my past or anything. And I'm like, I could be like, I'm a pretty plain dresser. Like, I'm neutrals, and I'm not fancy,
Sure.
I don't dress up or anything. So I was thinking, I could be like, I could wear purple pants and nobody would know that that's not me, like that's not who I
I
am.
could
And I
reinvent
could be,
myself a little bit.
I could actually reinvent. Yes, I was like, I could just go crazy right now and reinvent myself, and nobody would ever know. And like, that's kind of daunting though, that there is not a person here who knows my history, or, beyond my first name,
Yeah.
nobody knows anything about me. And so yeah, I had like a few moments like that where I was just like, this is so bizarre, and I don't know if it's okay, but in any case, I stuck it out. And it helped that I, met Tony my first year here, because I honestly don't know. I mean, I do kind of appreciate living here. I'm okay with living here at the moment, and I think I would have been okay, but it certainly helped that that I got married, and
Yeah.
now we have 3 kids, and they were all born here as well. So
Your roots get a
I
little
guess,
bit deeper.
yeah, I guess so.
Were your parents supportive of you going at first?
Yeah, they were.
That's great.
They
That
were.
makes it easier.
It Yeah, they did think, okay, I think they had the same approach as me, like that, well, Nicole has to go on her adventure. So we'll let her. And in any case, they were not just supportive, they came to visit as well, a couple months later. And so I think that was also great. And they come every year at least to visit, even before we had kids. And we have kids, they're definitely
Yeah.
they visit more often. But so yeah, so that really helped as well.
Wonderful. Well, tell us what life is like living in Jerusalem. Do you speak other languages as well?
Well, I didn't come here with another
Okay.
language. I had, you know, it, America and its system of learning a second language is just so lacking.
Yeah.
And, we're just pegged as one language, we're unilingual. It's so sad. So, I had, of course, Spanish in high school, but I didn't really speak it well. And then I tried to teach myself Italian a couple years because I was moving, visiting Italy and just
Sure.
wanting to get in touch with my roots and stuff like that. So I tried to learn Italian, but I might it didn't I'm not fluent. So I came here with just English pretty
Sure.
much. Definitely not, let's put it this way, not a Semitic language, not Hebrew and not
Yeah.
Arabic. So when I got here, I was, young, single, gung ho. Like I want to learn every language that there is here. There's only two, by the way, but I wanted to learn Hebrew, and so I took what they call Ulpan, and it's the Hebrew language class, and then at some point, a couple of months into that, I was like, well, I should be learning Arabic as well, and I found a course that was about it's spoken Arabic, which was great
Wow.
because like the words were in English, let's say,
Okay.
like marhaba, it means hello, but it was written like in English, marhaba, marhaba. So I can instantly say a word without having to try to pronounce it. Whereas Hebrew, which is a different alphabet from English and from Arabic, you had to sound it out like a first grader, and then also know what the word meant and everything. So I took both at the same time for a
Wow.
while, and yeah, it was great. I got my wires crossed, and then at the time, because like I had said before, it was the Intifada, and that it was a little bit tense. I don't want to say it was unsafe. There were moments that it was unsafe, but it was tense. And for instance, you didn't want to go to a Jewish neighborhood and say marhaba, and you didn't want to go to an Arab neighborhood, or the market in the old city and say shalom. You wanted to um keep your or just go with English, like,
Sure.
just say like, I'm American, I don't know, I don't know anything, I'm not on anybody's side here, I'm okay. um so so anyway, so I stopped, at some point, I just stopped with one language and pursued the other, and said when I finish that, I'll go back to the other one, because I was getting my wires
I
crossed,
can't
and
imagine.
yeah, saying the wrong thing at the wrong place. So I was like, all right, let me just stick with one and then go with English, until I can learn the other one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and like you said, as in America, right? Like our unilanguage, like it's hard enough for us to learn a language as an adult, let alone try to put two completely different
I
alphabets,
know.
and like that would be wow. And I believe, isn't Arabic one of the hardest languages to learn? Right?
Yeah,
Like
they
up there with like
say,
Mandarin, I think, right? Very challenging.
I think, yeah, that, and also Russian. And there's a lot of Russian speakers here. Apparently, like the grammar is really complex. And also with Arabic, there's a spoken Arabic, and in each country it's slightly different. But there's also a classic Arabic,
Wow.
and the classic Arabic is written. And so written Arabic could be the same everywhere, but the spoken is slightly different. So what I was learning was just like the spoken Palestinian dialect, which, by the way, is different everywhere around this land,
Sure.
because I learned from somebody who's from northern Israel, the spoken Arabic, and I had this like odd accent,
Yeah,
to other people in Jerusalem. They were like, why do you say the ka? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. Isn't that what
that's
you're
what I
supposed to
learned.
be? They're like, oh, so anyway, so that was yeah. And when I did finally start learning Arabic grammar, that was a little bit more challenging, like the letter changes within the word. Whether it's like the beginning of the word, the middle of the word, the end of the word,
Oh,
the
wow.
letter changes.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh my goodness,
I
it's
was
mind
just thinking,
blowing.
oh, just kind of like Spanish, but that sounds much more complex than Spanish.
Uh, it was so it's yeah, it's all mind blowing, really, these languages. But I love them. And by the way, also, but accents, like that's the worst part, is that even if I was fluent in either language, my accent will always give me
Mhm.
away. The accents are so much harder than rolling your R's in Italian. And that was hard for me.
Yeah.
So let like all these gutturals, and I'm just like, oh boy, anyway, I try, and I like it, but I'm no expert, and I'm nowhere near fluent. So
Yeah.
such a shame.
Wow. Well, what is life
Yeah.
like today? Give us a picture of Jerusalem today.
Oh, that's such a great question, and it can change from day to
Yeah,
day.
it's
So
probably a very broad, big answer too.
yeah, but trying to look at it like from the perspective of when I got here, I think first of all, the city is maybe way more modern than we romanticize it as being. When you hear Jerusalem, you're thinking, of course, ancient, and I don't know, just like this sultry, Middle Eastern sandy, stone walls and stuff like that. And it's all of that, but within the texture of a very modern society
Yeah.
of a lot of cars and roads and buildings. But it's also a very chaotic and frenetic tempo.
Yeah.
As And it's funny that I say to people, like, New York is where I was raised, in New York City, in the suburbs of New York City. And I actually go there now to relax,
Yeah.
because Jerusalem is actually more crazy than New York City, believe it or not. So, Frank Sinatra said, if I can make it there, I can make it anywhere. Talking about New York, and I was like, no, 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 Jerusalem. If you can make it in Jerusalem, then you're going to make it anywhere. So,
Yeah. I didn't think about that, but we were living in Sicily when we visited Jerusalem, which is Italy in its own right is chaotic, right? And so I think that really
yeah.
probably was a buffer where it didn't seem like I think if I would have come from the States to visit Jerusalem, it would have been a lot, I'd probably been a lot more overwhelmed versus having come from Sicily to Jerusalem. Like it was much, it was like, okay, I mean, kind
Mhm.
of par for course. Sicily's kind of chaotic too if you go downtown.
Yeah.
So,
I actually, in my mind, I'm thinking that Sicily, like, I haven't been to Sicily, I've been to other parts of Italy, but I think that might be more chaotic than Jerusalem in some
it's
ways.
like the Wild West of Italy, we used to say all the time.
Yeah.
It's just very chaotic and rules don't really apply. And, it just,
Yeah.
yeah, we could go on about Sicily, but it's also chaotic in its own way.
Yeah.
So,
What did you think of Jerusalem?
I loved it.
Yeah.
We went with two other families when we went. And so we had like kind of this little group, but the food, the shopping, the music, and correct me if I'm wrong, the cars can't drive in the old city part of Jerusalem though, right? It's just pedestrian.
For most of it.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, you can drive in through Jaffa Gate and out through Zion Gate, like just a little bit of
sure.
very few other places. Yeah.
Um, but I loved it. But I love things like that, like learning about other cultures, hearing other languages, just experiencing life. My favorite thing to do is like kind of wander out and then get lost and then find your way back to wherever you're staying. Cause I think you see so much. And I mean, we've had young kids while we've been traveling now the past, 9, 10 years. And so it just having a scheduled itinerary is really hard with kids. And so for me, I'm like, I'd rather just go get lost with our stroller and then wander back and see what we can see.
Oh, that's awesome. That's exactly how we've been approaching travel as well, because we can't travel unless we bring our kids
Yeah.
these days. And we're like, oh, we really want to travel. So we're just like, yeah, we go and wander. And yeah, I mean, that's also how I learned the old city of Jerusalem, that I just wandered,
Yeah.
and I would come every day after work. I was in a very nice neighborhood in Jerusalem, where my work was, but I would walk about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes to the old city. And then I would just wander from like 4:30, 5 o'clock until 6 or 7 o'clock when they were, shutting up the shops and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And I would just meet people, and I just loved it. Like it was really the way to get to know the city.
Yeah. And you find like those little hole in the wall places to eat, like that don't have everything written out for the tourist. It's like, okay, like I feel like you
Yeah.
really get an authentic experience that way.
Oh yeah, totally. Totally. And then the more you get to know the locals, you ask them like, okay, where would you eat? Because everybody's heard of Abu Shukri, as far as hummus, but where do you eat? Ah, you eat at Abu Kamal, not
Yeah.
at Abu Shukri. Okay, and then it's like, well, let me go check out that place and see how they serve their hummus. So yeah, that's true. I love it.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like there was, naively, I think there's misconceptions about traveling to Jerusalem or Israel from like safety concerns. And can you speak to that? Like maybe there's some listeners that are thinking about planning a trip to the Holy Lands.
Yeah, I would say that I feel very safe here. In fact, when I moved here, I felt safer walking around the city at night, not necessarily the old city, but even just the city in general. I felt safer at night than I did in New York.
Wow.
And I feel there is some sort of safety here. People are looking out for each other. Now, there is also, of course, there are, violent episodes that make the news, but for the most part, it's it's really safe. It's fine. It's more diverse than you probably expect. Like you probably expect, because you may hear that there's tension between religions and nationalities and whatever, you would expect then that there would be more segregation. But honestly, like you've got everybody on a daily basis. You're passing Jews and Arabs, and among the Arabs are Muslims and Christians, and then among the Jews there's all, from American Jews that immigrated to like Russians or French or Moroccan background. And I don't know, just there's constantly, it's very monotone diversity, but it's a massive diversity of people, cultures, and religion just in your daily life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was something that impressed me. That is, it seemed they're all living life together and they are so diverse, right? And just, I
Yeah.
mean, like you kind of said though in the beginning, it's not without conflict over the years, but still they've managed to do it for hundreds of years, be very diverse
Right.
and, you know, live together.
Yeah. Yeah, it is amazing. And I think there's actually, it's just more diversity than people would expect if they're only reading the news. And with people being so polarized, for or against Israel or for or against the Palestinians, here the Israelis and Palestinians are intermingling on a daily basis, whether it's shopping, in the mall, or, in the grocery store or in the old city. Now, I'm not saying that they all love each
Mhm.
other, but they are walking by each other on a daily basis. And it's not like there's quarters. Well, there are quarters in the city, but it's not like there's like, you stick to your side and I'll stick to mine. It's pretty much, I think that would be shocking for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we visited Jerusalem, this was, what year did we go? I think it was late 2018. I think we were there. And we weren't yet so polarized, I think, as a country, the US, right? I mean, maybe some tensions were starting, but I can't imagine now. Well, I could imagine, but now, like the sentiments going on, it's like, okay, this could, and then
Right.
you're going there, and then you're seeing this intermingling, and
Right. And that's what I think. I think there's more polarization on US campuses than there is here
yeah,
in the city itself, in Jerusalem itself.
yeah. The reality is, this life has to go on, and so you're intermingling with everybody, and I think
Yeah.
it they've been doing that all the time, so it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually is true. Yeah, people don't realize that.
Do I feel like we got this when we lived in Sicily, but people would ask us, like, they thought, because we're American. Okay, we want to talk to you about, I mean, politics can be such a divisive thing. We don't need to go into that, but like they always want to, are there different perspectives of the US that you get living there, being an American, that we then like quote unquote we have of ourselves, I think a lot of times.
Oh, that's so funny. You know what? That's a great question, but I don't know 100% anymore.
Yeah.
There's the typical like Americans, there's typical like, not anti-American. I don't feel that people here are necessarily anti-American, but they might think that we don't understand as much as we should about them or about, the rest of the world, and that we're very like insular. And so I there's probably that, but I don't get, thank God, like an anti-American
Yeah.
thing. Like it's okay to be American for the most part.
Yeah. And that was, I feel like in Sicily, but they were like, just sometimes I think they get very confused. Like, why is this such a hot button issue for Americans? Like, like they didn't quite understand why certain things were just these hot button topics. And,
Oh yeah,
like, why
okay.
is this even an issue? Kind of, in the grander scheme of things. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Can't answer to that. So,
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Yeah, I guess there are things like that. Like, for instance, abortion
yeah.
is a huge political issue in America, but in Israel, it's not a political issue whatsoever. It's nobody's voting on abortion.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't even know what the politicians' stances are on that. It doesn't come up. But that's one of the things that I would say is an issue for them, not an issue here. And they're like, and I have been asked, like, why is it such a big deal in America? Why do you, and I don't, whatever. It's just funny to see the different approach to it.
Yeah. And I think based off where you live, right, there might be bigger fish to fry that are, like issues within your geopolitical area that the politicians are
Yeah.
like, we have enough on our plate to manage with that. Like this is what we got to go for, or I don't know if that's true,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, it is true. Somebody once said to me that abortion is a luxury issue
mm,
to have. Like, we're dealing with defense. And so the only thing we can talk about is national defense. I mean, that was from the Israeli perspective.
yeah,
Yeah. So,
yeah. It's, 'tis the season here in America with the politics, and
yeah.
I'm like, oh.
Yeah, true, true. Yeah.
So, well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about who you are as a reader. We're going to bring it back to books here a little bit. So, what type of genres do you enjoy reading?
Okay, my favorite genre, hands down, is historical fiction.
Yay, me
I
too.
just love, and oh,
Yeah.
cool. Okay. That's actually, I would say, probably what had a hand in bringing me to Israel. Because when I was a kid, teenager, well, actually, let me back up. When I was it wasn't historical fiction, but I read a book for some reason, um, for a library. The library has the summer program, and
Yeah.
and you summer reading club. And so I was in fifth grade, and I read this book called Appointment in Jerusalem. And it was a biography about a woman who had come here from Denmark. And it was before the state of Israel. It was during the British mandate. And she started an orphanage for Arab kids
Wow.
in Jerusalem. So I just remember being so impacted by this book. My mother reminded me of this. I told the woman at the library, she's like, what book did you read? And what did it say? Or what did you like about it? And I said, I read this book. And she's like looking through the list, like, this wasn't from our library. And I'm like, oh, no, I just wanted to read it. And I said, and I'm going to go live in Jerusalem someday.
Wow.
And she was like, okay, little fifth grader, whatever. Like, I couldn't point to it on a map. I had no idea. I
Yeah.
didn't know what country it was in or anything. So then after a couple of years later, I started reading. There's a series called The Zion Chronicles, and it's by an author, Bodhi Taney.
Okay.
Uh, she, which is spelled Thone.
Okay.
So this Chronicles were, it was about this like young American reporter who moved it was, again, it was British mandate Palestine at the time, and it was before the 1948 war. And so, of course, I was intrigued because, like, this American reporter lived there. And so it's historical fiction about the founding of the state of Israel. Now, mind you, I've come like a long way in my reading since
Well,
then,
yeah,
but I
you
will
were
say
a
that
kid.
I was a kid.
Yeah.
I was a kid, and I think that the author is Christian, and so it was interesting. It was the founding of the Jewish state, but it was by a Christian author, and I think there were Christian elements in the book. And so anyway, that read the entire series, and so I would, very good for that. When I was that age, and the action,
Sure.
loved it, whatever. So, but since then, pretty much always historical fiction is what I love to read, and I feel like if I can learn something, but through being taken there, and it's so much more impactful for me than reading a real, like, an actual history book. I
Oh,
hate to
yeah.
say, like, it's so much harder. I want a story. So
Yeah.
that, yeah,
I think that it makes
that's
like you're able to put it in your memory a little bit better because you're going to go back to the story and you're going to remember the time period or the events they were going through versus like if we're just learning it verbatim like we did in our history books, there's no way my brain remembers that.
yeah, exactly. But I can remember, the place according to the description and what happened, and like with the story. Oh yeah, and that's where that happened. But I just heard somewhere that a great historical fiction uh, novel is what, as soon as you finish, you get to the last word of the book, you put it down, and immediately, like, you go to Google or you go to the internet, and you're like searching
Yep.
for what part is true, or how, anyway. So that's totally me.
Totally. And you want to know more of the story. And I'm always with historical fiction, like, well, how much of this was true? Because sometimes it really takes you on a ride and you're like, wow, this was someone's life. And so you're like,
Yeah,
oh, how much of
exactly.
that was true? And then you come to find out majority of it was true. And you're like, wow, okay,
Yes.
fascinating.
Yes. I just finished a book. I was floored. I have it right here. The Forest of Vanishing
Oh,
Stars.
okay. I haven't read that one, but I've heard of the author, Kristen Harmel. So,
Oh, it was one of the, like, I picked it up at the airport because I didn't have a book and I needed one for a trip. So I picked it up at the airport, and I was like, wow, I have no idea how this is going to pan out, but I have never, like, I was absolutely floored. Um, it's World War II
okay.
uh, based, and it's about a girl who was raised in a forest, and to and survived the Holocaust, but then it brings in elements of entire communities of Jewish refugees who fled their neighborhoods and actually survived in the forest. I'm
Wow.
trying to think, between Poland and I forgot which part of Russia. Now I can't remember, but it's one of these things, that
Yeah.
I researched after, like, what, where this was happening, and it really was true. So anyway, absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you have been so gracious to bring a book flight for us today as well. Can you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit? I know it's impossible to narrow down to three books, but how did you narrow these down?
Okay. That's great. I'm going to tell you how and why. So, my journey here in Israel, and in living in Jerusalem, has been one where I came with maybe one perspective, or just kind of one. I came here knowing, okay, this is Israel, this is the Jewish state, and so that's, I kind of only expected to meet Jews and to see, like, what the Jewish state was in the Middle East. And then, as I was saying before, how I wandered around the old city, and then I met Arabs, and among the Arabs there are Muslims and Christians. And at first, it was like, whoa, wait, if you're like, what do you guys do? What are you doing here? Like, I just walked from my apartment to here, and like, there's like all the shopkeepers here are Arab. And then of the Arabs, there's, it's like expecting them, Arab means Muslim. That's another thing. Like with Americans, like you hear Arab, you think Muslim, but so many of the Arabs here are Christian, and they are like, many of them, the original Christians, like from the time of Jesus, to, now. And I mean, they can trace back their centuries. So it's just amazing. So my journey here was to go from like, just seeing like, okay, I expect to hear the Israeli narrative and the Jewish narrative here. And then suddenly I was meeting Israeli Arabs and Palestinian Arabs as well. And then finding out that among them, there are Muslims and Christians. And the real traditional Christians, like the Greek Orthodox, the Coptic, the Assyrian, just very fascinating diversity within this very small minority of Christians here in Israel, 2% actually. And then I met Armenians. And I was like, what? How can this place get any more complicated? And the Armenians are Christian. The Armenia was the first, and this is like, as soon as you meet an Armenian, you're going to find out that Armenia was the first nation to declare Christianity its national religion.
Wow.
And that they underwent that in the 1900s, they underwent a genocide, the Armenian genocide. And so that will be like the two things that an Armenian will pretty much immediately tell you when you meet them. So now in Jerusalem, what's interesting about Jerusalem is that there's 4 quarters of the old city, and there's Jewish, Muslim, and Christian quarter, and Armenian. And the Armenian quarter is the only nationality, of a quarter. Like the rest are based on religions.
Yeah.
And yet, the Armenians are Christian. And so it's kind of like an extension of the Christian quarter. But so my discovery got more and more specific as I went along, like majority Jewish state, of like 9 million to 10 million citizens, majority are Jewish. And then, met the 21 to 22% Arabs among who Christian and Muslim. And then the not even maybe 10,000 Armenians in all of the country, but that have had a presence here for 1700 years. Wow. The Armenian quarter has been around since around the time Armenia itself, which is up by, between Turkey, Azerbaijan, Iran, up there. They declared Christianity the state religion in 301. And then from that year, they started making pilgrimages to Jerusalem.
Okay.
So yeah, so that was so that's how like the Armenian quarter developed. The pilgrims would come and stay in Jerusalem in the old city, and eventually like this, they developed like the quarter.
Yeah.
So
as you're talking, it's like another, like I'm seeing these stacks of layers, like just adding on to the complexity of what life in Jerusalem is like.
Yes. Yeah. And so, well, what I tried to do was find books that will give you like that, that also reflect the diversity. And the funny thing is, as much as there are so many books written about Jerusalem, and I think like you can find famous ones, but I kind of picked off the beaten path ones. And
which I think is fantastic.
Oh, good. Oh, this is relatively new. My first one is called Parallel Lines.
Okay.
And it's by Ruth Marks Eglash, who is a reporter actually here in Jerusalem. I didn't know her personally until I went to her book books. She had a book launch.
Okay.
And so she moved here. I think she's from England originally. And so a lot of this book actually reflects a little bit of her journey, and also that of now her teenage kids. And Parallel Lines has to do with a lot of what we were talking about today, about how the cultures are sort of running parallel to each other. Yeah. And so in this novel, she focuses on a Jewish girl and a Muslim girl and how their lives overlap. And also just like, despite the tensions and despite the political situation, how they're still teenagers and they still face a lot of the same issues. And, with, being socially accepted or, by their peers, and also just career choices and things like that. So, so anyway, that is a great book.
Do they, just out of curiosity, are they friends? Did you mention they're friends?
Oh, they're not, they don't know each other in
Oh,
the
okay.
beginning of,
Okay.
yeah, they're just riding the same train.
Okay. Because I
And,
think that this is what reading can do for us, is it can create, I think empathy is a huge bonus to reading, and realizing that no matter how different we are, we still have similar life experiences and we still have similar struggles. And so I love reading for that reason. So this is going to go on my list for sure.
oh yeah, no, this is a great one. And I think this is her first novel,
Okay.
actually. So yeah, so anyway, I think this is it's really well done.
Yeah.
It's well done, and I can relate to a lot of it in terms of having lived here and having, come from abroad and just having to see, and now walking in the different cultures like myself, being more with my husband. I didn't maybe say this before, but my husband's Armenian, and that's
Okay.
how I got the deep dive into the whole Armenian side of the story. But but since we kind of walk in all of these different parallel lines, I think that this, I really related to a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that one with us. That was Parallel Lines by Ruth Marks Eglash, you said?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
perfect.
exactly. Okay, all right. So my second book is actually called Second Person Singular,
Okay.
and it's a book by Syed Kashua. I can spell his name for you, or send it to you.
Yeah,
But
send it and I can have it in the show notes. So that works.
okay,
Yeah.
great. So he is an Arab author. I don't know if he calls himself an Israeli Arab or Palestinian.
Okay.
But the beauty of this book is that it will tell you all of the complexities of whether somebody is considered Israeli Arab or Palestinian. And it's really a deep dive from his own experiences, but it is a novel of an Arab growing up in Israel, and how you, like, the struggle of whether to integrate or relate as a, or remain,
Yeah.
maintain your Palestinian Arab identity. And if you integrate into Israeli society, it means that, your Hebrew has to be very good. And many Arabs have an accent on their Hebrew. So they're immediately pinpointed as Arab. They'll also be asked whether they have done army service, which is a really big issue for Arabs, as to what should they serve in the army, should they not? I mean, most of them don't. And whereas it's mandatory to serve in the army, but Arabs get an exemption, and many of them take it, because by doing that, it's almost like being a traitor. So there's so many deep identity issues. And I read this book and I was like, oh my gosh, it was so overwhelming to think of all of the decisions you have to make. Because now, if you just want to succeed and become a doctor, the best thing you could do is to become a doctor like in an Israeli hospital. But then the question is, so what do you sacrifice of your Palestinian identity in order to then integrate with the language, with the culture, to then have them accept you, but then maybe to never be fully accepted?
Yeah. Is there
So
familial pressures as well that come with that?
there can be, and there can be there are societal pressures. There's internal struggle as well.
Sure.
And it's the struggle of, if if your dream and aspiration is to succeed, and this is the country in which you were born, how much of your identity do you have to like seed
Yes.
as a Palestinian, as an Arab, in order to integrate into Jewish Israeli society, which is where the platform will be waiting for you to have, like whether it's sports, whether it's being a doctor or a lawyer. And so I think that book for me was so illuminating as to the struggles and the internal struggles that people go through, that Arabs specifically here have to go through in order to, they have to determine how they want to succeed.
Yeah.
And I really, really appreciated that. Now
Wow.
he's this author, he actually, I never met him. We just, I think, didn't overlap by a year or something, but his kids were going to school where my kids now go in Jerusalem. It's called Hand in Hand. And it's Jews and Arabs together in the
Wow.
school. And then people like us who are neither, and whatever,
Sure.
we are happy to be part of that, because it's supposed to be a school where people grow up. Kids will beat each other with no background, no political ideology whatsoever, and become friends. And the friendship is, the hope is that the friendship lasts, and that eventually will bring about the peace that everybody is so desiring here.
Yeah, what an amazing school. And hopefully growing up with that, right? I think we so have gotten away from being able to have conversations when we're on different sides, and coming back together through, like, I hate to throw around the term love, but like just love and conversation. And we don't have to be so polarized. Like, we can both have our own stances and still exist together, like, and still be friends, and still, yes, it's complicated, but I think we've gotten away from being able to have these types of debate type conversations.
Yeah, and that's so sad.
Yeah.
It's so sad, because I remember growing up, as a teenager, debating was fun.
Mm-hmm.
And now it feels like you can't, especially, like, I think in America it's worse than in Israel. In Israel, everybody's still debating. And I think it's great. I'm really happy my kids are going to the school where they are growing up, being exposed to all the different sides. And it, like you said before, it also develops empathy. And so while you may not, some people, they'll never always agree. Like the Jewish kids will probably grow up, and at 18 they'll serve in the army, and their Arab friends won't. And but they will always be able to manage that tension, because they learned that. Like, it doesn't mean that they have to come to agreement.
No, and we don't have to have the other side's opinion. I mean, we just can coexist together.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that book really helped me understand more the struggle. Now I do, like, I chose specifically that book because it's an Arab growing up in Israel, as opposed to a Palestinian who's very much like no Israeli citizenship or residency, but yes, like maybe just 2 miles away from me, but Palestinian is different, just in terms of like paperwork and just formality. They really are like geographically limited to a certain place. But I chose that book to show like the struggle for the Arab growing up in Israel, which is a little bit different than the struggles of the Palestinian, which are maybe also more political, and also just certain limitations on movement and stuff like that.
Yeah. A whole nother complex issue, I imagine.
A whole nother one. I can throw you another book for that, but it wasn't part of my flight.
Okay, all right. So that was Second Person Singular by Syed Kashua? Kashua. Okay, and then what's the last book you brought today?
Okay, so the last book I brought, because I have to bring the Armenian piece, and so the last book is called The Knock at the Door. And it is it's Margaret Ajemian Anert.
Okay.
And it's not a novel. It's not historical fiction, but it is written like a novel. And Margaret wrote this book about her mother's experience escaping the genocide that was going on in Turkey from the 1914 to 1918. And that the genocide is a very big piece of Armenian history. So I was just listening to a talk that Margaret gave a couple years ago, and she said that that the Armenians had like a policy of like forgetting and not talking about the experiences of the genocide, whereas the Jews have a policy called never forget.
Okay.
And so they have approached their genocides differently. And she said that she thinks the Jewish way was the better way, was to remember what happened. And so for her to get the story from her mother, and the Armenian genocide is like, was violent, was vile, was just like in not as systematic as the Nazis, but it was maybe worse for its chaos and just the rampant and wanton slaughter, as opposed to the systematic moving of people to into camps and into gas chambers and rounding them up and having very specific names and numbers, which have been documented. Whereas the Armenian genocide was just like, let's slaughter here, let's go on a rampage here, let's just march them, and then in the middle of death marches from Turkey through the deserts of Syria and on. They just killed people at random along the walks. So this book is the story of Margaret's mother and her stories. It's different from others that I read in terms of like people who finish the march, or because I've read a few about them, but in this she well, I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, anyway, she has another way out that she eventually can that she gets rescued. So but a lot of the Armenians now, the population of Armenians in Jerusalem actually increased after the genocide, because many of them came here after that. They were going to places like in Syria and Lebanon and Jordan on their way out of Syria, and they eventually made it to Jerusalem, like wherever they had family, and many of them had family already here in Jerusalem, and so that's how they ended up here. But they went to pre-existing Armenian communities when they escaped there.
Sure.
So there is always, like every year, there's a lot to say about the Armenian community here. They have maintained their identity as Armenians. The first language there is Armenian. They have a school. They have a library with old manuscripts, ancient manuscripts, and a really old church. And so the Armenians have a very strong identity here.
Okay, so that was the knock on the door, and I think I will not get the name correct, so I will include the name of the author in the show notes. So
yes.
So, well,
I'm sure I'm saying it wrong anyway. Yeah.
Okay. And then how I love to end our show really quick is just our bonus pairings, which are a speed round of questions. You can answer these really quick. Are you a rereader?
I am not.
Okay. So, and then where is your favorite place to read?
Oh, that's awesome. I can't say like, I mean, I have a dream place to read, and that'd be like in a mountain retreat, somewhere somewhere else. But my only place to read right now is just in bed before I go to sleep.
Okay.
It's my only quiet and free time, so I have to, and I just do.
It's like your mini retreat in the day.
Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah.
It's no choice, but it's just become the place.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then lastly, what are you reading next?
Oh, wow. Okay. I am reading a book right now called, and this would have been the other book on the flight, but then I decided to do the Israeli Arab one. But I'm reading a book called Mornings in Jenin.
Okay.
It is totally about the Palestinian narrative of the Palestinian perspective of being in the land when during the war, and then becoming refugees in their own land when Israel came in and Israel became a state.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm starting right now.
Okay. All right. Well, we could always add that in as a dessert pairing on the flight. So,
Okay.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for this conversation and teaching us and kind of giving us perspective of what it's like to live in Jerusalem. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. It was great talking to you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Nicole Jansezian and her book flight of books that feature the diversity of living in Jerusalem. We'd love to hear what other books you'd pair with this book flight at bookishflights.com. That is also where you can find more information about today's book flight or other books that we talked about. I want to inspire a community of readers. So whenever you share a post about what you are reading or what you are reading next, especially if you have heard about it on the show, please tag us on Facebook or Instagram at Bookish Flights. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Your review not only helps the show, but it also helps the podcast to reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure you will not miss an episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.